I am fully aware that I am standing between you and some amazing lunch opportunities around the fairgrounds today. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started talking about the Common Swine Industry Audit. I'm going to cover a little bit of background on the history of quality assurance, sort of where we've come from, because we're not starting from scratch, and then talk a little bit about the Industry Audit Task Force, but spend most of our time this morning talking about the Common Swine Industry Audit, what it is, how it works, what the next steps are, and what that means for Pork Quality Assurance Plus program, as well as a final note on the idea of comprehensive quality assurance. So the background in history, our industry first started down the path in 1989 with the introduction of the Pork Quality Assurance Program, or the PQA program, was launched primarily to address sulfur residues and food safety concerns associated with our product. Since that time, we have, over the next 25 years, we have, as an industry, attacked other issues that have faced us in terms of pork quality and animal welfare with our TQA, or Transport Quality Assurance Program, launching in 2001, the Swine Welfare Assurance Program launching in 2003. In 2007, right here at Expo that year, we introduced Pork Quality Assurance Plus, or the PQA Plus program, and it was the merge of the PQA, the food safety side, with the SWAP program, the welfare side, to provide more of a comprehensive program for our producers. The program was meant to be a comprehensive platform to align producer performance with market chain expectations. And the three tenets that we operated on were that the program had to be workable, affordable, and credible for all segments of the chain. It was a voluntary education program as offered by Pork Checkoff. However, we were seeing much of the marketplace implement the program into their HACCP type of programs to assure the sourcing of pigs coming into the plant. Because our industry is very wide and diverse in how we operate, the program was designed to be applicable to any pig farm regardless of the size, the geographic location, the type of production, the phase of production that was being used on the site. Originally, the program had three components. The first was the certification piece. That was the education piece, which actually was just happening next door to us before this session. The second step was the site assessment, which was an opportunity to benchmark how those good production practices had been implemented on the farm, and working with the advisor to identify areas that were needed for continuous improvement. We had a third-party verification process associated with the program. The Pork Checkoff worked with two auditing vendors to sample sites that had completed the PQA Plus site assessment to give us a third-party feedback on how the program was working. And it gave us good information because as the program has evolved over the years, we've identified key areas we needed to focus further education and outreach. However, the industry was clearly moving in a direction towards individual audits on farm to meet customer expectations. That was the one thing that PQA Plus was not achieving, and that was a real need within our industry. So we started to see more and more audits being done on farm. However, producers, particularly those producers that sell to more than one packer, had a lot of concern about multiple standards or multiple auditing criteria being asked of them, and multiple audits being done on their farms from a biosecurity and health standpoint. So our board started asking questions about how do we avoid the British experience where their producers have multiple audits a year. Sometimes those audits are conflicting depending on who is coming out to do those audits. Can our industry agree to one set of criteria so that we can establish a standard baseline throughout our industry? And what's the role of PQA Plus? There's a lot of time and effort spent on that program by our producers. And if it doesn't have the role that it's designed to fulfill, then we should look for other opportunities. And importantly, growing more importantly so, how do we position the U.S. industry in the global marketplace regarding animal welfare? Animal welfare is not currently a legitimate trade barrier through the WTO, but those discussions do come up particularly in country-to-country negotiations. And with exports representing such an important segment of our business and providing so much value to our producers, we want to make sure we're in a good position to address any questions and concerns that may come up. So in 2013 and 14, our Pork Act delegates at Pork Forum introduced this resolution asking Checkoff to facilitate a group of industry stakeholders to come together and try and establish one consistent set of audit criteria, something that would meet the needs of our customers while reducing and minimizing the need for multiple audits on farms. So in response to that resolution, our board of directors, the Checkoff board of directors, allocated funds and man hours to create the Industry Audit Task Force. This task force was made up of all of the major packers and several of our producers throughout the industry. We tried to make sure that the representation on that task force was very diverse. Their purpose was to facilitate the development of a workable, credible, and affordable on-farm verification system, particularly for animal well-being, but that did expand to also include food safety, with the hope of eliminating duplication of audits or minimizing administrative burden on producers, as well as developing consensus about consistent criteria, and then have a standard process that results in inter and intra-observer consistency so that what our auditors are seeing and what they're reporting are consistent throughout the industry, as well as protecting herd health. So that group worked for over 18 months to come up with the Common Swine Industry Audit. They started from the base discussion of can we sit down as a group and do this, and progressed to the final product, which you see here. The Common Swine Industry Audit is available online. It's available, has been available since last October for anyone within the industry to access and use. On the website, you'll find the audit materials themselves. The picture posted is of the audit document, the audit standards, and the tool. Within that are instructions for how to conduct the audit, as well as the standard itself, and then the tool of which the standard is measured by. There's also a template for corrective action form, and there's also an interactive audit tool spreadsheet. When we beta tested the audit, the flow of the layout of the audit document is designed to help from a scoring standpoint, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's not necessarily useful in terms of how you would go and walk through the farm. So the spreadsheet allows the reordering of the audit points, so you can maintain good biosecurity during the audit, but then transforms that back into each of the proper sections. There's also a frequently asked questions section, as well as additional resources. So as Checkoff, we've tried to identify key resources that would be useful to producers for each of the standards that are listed within the audit. The last note on the audit tool is that you'll notice that there's no branding. Beyond the PACO certified label on the audit, it's not labeled as a Checkoff document, and the purpose of that is because we want it to be owned and embraced by the industry, so anyone can pick it up and use it and incorporate it into the quality assurance program that they currently have. The audit instructions, we covered the scope, what the scope of the audit is, which is from birth to transport from the farm. As I mentioned before, it does cover animal welfare as well as food safety. The audit instructions also provide an overview of the objective of the audit, as well as defining what is a site, which is the same definition that we have within PQA Plus, so it's identified by the premises identification number. It talks about scheduling an audit, as well as providing resources for auditors on good biosecurity practices. So the rule of thumb is always follow the practices of the farm that are laid out by the farm. In the absence that those don't exist, we provide a basic biosecurity protocol for them to use. We also provide information on animal sampling and selection once they're at the site, and some advice on conducting the audit, as well as scoring and completion, along with corrective action. So the audit standard itself, it's a little small, I apologize, but in the animal well-being section, there are really 4 key areas. The first is the animal section, which covers willful acts of abuse and humane euthanasia, as well as animal handling and each of the key welfare indicators from an animal perspective. So looking at the animal itself and trying to understand how that animal is coping within the environment in which it lives. So regardless of whether that animal is in a pen or in a stall, outdoor, indoor, these are the indicators that will tell you how the animal is doing. And those include body space, body condition, lameness, abscesses, shoulder sores, tail biting, hernias, prolapses, scratches, vulva injuries, but it also includes thermal comfort and mortality management. The items that are starred are items that are currently in the PQA Plus site assessment. So they are pieces that if you've completed a site assessment, you should be familiar with and have seen before. The second area is the facilities where the animals are housed. So looking at air quality, as well as emergency backup ventilation, euthanasia equipment, all aspects of the facilities, penning, flooring, chutes, alleyways, feeders and waters, and then animal cleanliness. The third piece we're looking at in terms of animal well-being are the caretakers themselves. So making sure that caretaker training exists, that it's documented, that there is a treatment management policy, so everyone on the farm understands how to recognize when an animal has been treated and how long it's been treated for. That ties in with the humane euthanasia and knowing when that humane endpoint should occur. The final section under animal well-being is the records section. Testing, emergency backup, this is all of the paperwork type of records. Having a euthanasia plan, site assessments, daily observation records, having written SOPs, emergency action plan, and mortality records. The two additional pieces of the audit that fall, I shouldn't say fall outside of that, but transport and loadout is a special section of its own, because if transport and loadout is happening at the time of the audit, then we have questions within the audit that can be measured. Those include fitness for transport, animal handling equipment, prod usage, loading density, the state of repair of the trailer, as well as alignment with the facility and weather setup within the trailer. The last section is the food safety section. It covers the storage of animal health products, needle sizes that are used, as well as how those are disposed of, VCPR, medication and treatment records, VFD records. If you were in the session earlier today, you probably heard more than you ever wanted to know about VFD record keeping. Having an SOP for needle usage, in particular, what to do if a broken needle occurs and how to identify those animals. An SOP on biosecurity, rodent control, having a visitor log, as well as biosecurity signage around the farm. Within the audit, there are several audit questions, particularly those that are related to the caretakers, that involve interaction with the caretaker on the farm. The auditor is meant to interact with the caretakers in a conversational way and asking questions in an open-ended way so that they're not leading caretakers on how to answer certain questions. So examples would be, what tasks are you responsible for? What training did you receive to do those tasks? How do you do the task? And when did this animal receive treatment? And how do you know that? And so those questions are key to helping the auditor answer the audit tool questions that they have. We are well aware that we have many employees on the farm that may not speak English as their first language. And so there are a couple of ways around that. Some farms will have someone on the farm interpret for them during those interviews and interactions. And some of our auditors are bilingual and can do that on their own. There are two areas that are considered critical criteria within the audit. They are the only two areas that result in an automatic pass-fail. And the audit task force felt that those two criteria rose to the level enough that they warranted that severe of a level. The first has to do with willful acts of abuse. and the second has to do with timely euthanasia. Those are the first two questions you see. Question 3, 4, and 5 are also related to timely euthanasia, but are only scored if euthanasia is occurring at the time of the audit. So if it's not happening, they mark NO or not observed for those particular questions. To give you an idea of how the scoring system works, so the audit tool and what is emphasized in the audit tool based on the scoring, everything else receives a numerical score. And audit questions are either worth 10, 5, 2, or 1 points apiece. And some questions are not applicable depending on the type of farm that you have. So, for example, shoulder lesions are primarily associated with sows. So if you have a wean to finish site, that question will be marked not applicable for you because it's not an issue there. So that's why there's a discrepancy in the number of point values that are possible for non-breeding or wean to finish sites versus breeding or sow sites. As you can see, when we divide the scores out into their subsections, that most of the emphasis, whether it's wean to finish or sow farms, is focused on the animal. So over 50% of the points, the possible points, are based on the animal themselves. And so the purpose of that is to really give us a good indication of how the animals are doing. If you're going to measure welfare, you have to ask the animals themselves, right? So, as I said, over 50% of the points are allocated to the animal benchmarking section. 7% of the points are for the caretaker section. 10% are associated with the facilities section, 7% with the records, and then 16% if transport loadout is happening at the time of the audit are associated with that category. So most of the points on the audit are related to animal welfare. The additional 7% are with the food safety section. So as I mentioned, in terms of audit scoring, there are those two key areas that are considered critical and have a pass-fail. Those are willful acts of abuse, again, and timely euthanasia. All of the other areas are scored. So either you receive the full point value for the question or none at all. There's no in-between. And the task force decided to do that so that there was limited amount of subjectivity that either you have it or you don't. The goal, particularly for the animal benchmarking components, are to present those in terms of how the farm relates to everyone else within that category. So to put some perspective on what that animal benchmark actually means. As I mentioned, we have total scores for animal welfare and food safety, but then section scores within the animal welfare piece so that it helps provide some context to what that overall score means. So if I have a farm and they earned an 85%, that may be good, that may be bad, but you don't know where those points came from. So by breaking it out into the subsections, you can really determine whether there's truly an issue with the animals themselves, or maybe they just weren't keeping records, the records that they were supposed to keep. And that provides two very different stories about a site. Defining a passing score, the audit task force was not able to do this based on their makeup and the nature, their purpose. What defines a passing score is the marketplace in which pigs are sold into. And again, providing this scoring breakout really helps provide context to that score so those decisions can be made. We get some questions about audits versus assessments. If I do one, does that replace the other? The important takeaway is that audits and assessments are two very different pieces. They have two very different functions. So assessments are meant to be educational and benchmarking. They're meant to provide measurement and feedback and interaction with your advisor. And they're completed by either a first or second party. So either someone on the farm is doing a self-assessment, or you're working with your PQA Plus advisor who is a second party to do that assessment. The audits are meant to be an objective snapshot in time. So there's no educational component to an audit, and it's completed by a third party. So someone who does not have a financial or personal vested interest within the site. They're merely there to look at the site and report what they find. PQA Plus serves the role of the site assessment. The Common Swine Industry Audit serves the role of the audit. So if you've completed a site assessment, that does not count as an audit. And if you've had an audit done, that does not count as a site assessment. We also get some questions about implementation. What happens if my farm fails an audit? What if I refuse to be audited? Do all farms have to be audited? How frequently will they be audited? And who's paying for it? The key to all of these questions is that it is dependent on the market into where you sell the pigs. Buyers in the marketplace, so primarily the packers, are responsible for reviewing audit results and as we talked in the last slide about setting what that passing score looks like. We do have a couple of models that are being used within the industry today. Some packers are requiring all of their suppliers to be audited over a 3-year period at the producer's expense. Others are using a statistical sampling of their suppliers, and they are paying for the audit. And so it really depends on the supply base and what is a reasonable measure of assurance for them. So next steps in PQA Plus. We're working on visual resources for the animal benchmarking criteria to help visually demonstrate what we have set the standard for in Word format. The Professional Animal Auditor Certification Organization is in the process of developing an auditor training course. They anticipate to be offering those courses later this fall for those that may be interested in becoming certified as an auditor. The Industry Audit Task Force is having ongoing discussions on data management and aggregation. So how do we as an industry, once the common audit is out there and it's being performed, how do we capitalize on the data that's coming back from a continuous improvement standpoint so that we know how to help producers from an outreach standpoint, but also giving us feedback on the quality of the audit tool itself. And therefore, the ongoing efforts of the Industry Audit Task Force. The audit is not meant to be stagnant. They intend to review it and improve it as we learn more. What that means in terms of PQA Plus, so the program is revised on a 3-year cycle, which means the next version of PQA Plus is due out in 2016. So when you come to Expo next year, that will be the new version of PQA Plus will be the highlight, so just a little bit of preview there. But we're working on updating the producer education as well as the site assessment to help it better align with the Common Swine Industry Audit. The third-party verification piece of the program, we intend for that to be replaced by the Common Swine Industry Audit. So we feel that the Common Swine Industry Audit and the auditing activities that are happening within our industry are providing more information, better information than what we're able to do with the verification component of PQA Plus. So we'll be removing that component. Audit preparation. As of now, we have communicated with PQA Plus advisors, so even though the program won't be revised and released until next year, advisors are aware of what is coming. They're aware of how it will change, and we've had discussions with them on how they can serve in that role to help producers prepare for an audit. Iowa pork producers are offering 24 courses across Iowa from starting June 12th through September 8th. So if you live in Iowa, I would encourage you to look into this and take advantage of this. The sessions are limited to 15 participants, and depending on participation, they may add additional sessions. But there's a registration information brochure out at the front desk, or the desk out just outside the door, or Tyler Bettine at Iowa Pork can answer any questions you have about these sessions. But the gist of these is to help particularly smaller producers who may not have any experience in writing SOPs or may be missing some of the records that are expected within the Common Audit, so to help producers meet those expectations. And the last note I have, comprehensive quality assurance. So we've talked a lot about auditing today. It is just one component in a broader scheme. It starts with having the right people on the farm, doing training, continuing training, using site assessments to feed back into management, as well as training. And then the audits provide that third-party aspect, which also feeds back into it. So again, it's one component of a broader process in how our industry looks at quality assurance and addresses the expectations of our customers. So in summary, we have an excellent 25 years of history of quality assurance within our industry, and in identifying those issues that are important to our customers and our consumers and how we address those. PQA Plus will continue to evolve. Change is the only thing that stays the same in life. So it will, as issues come up, we'll look to the program to deliver those messages. Engaging with customers to gain understanding of perspectives and meet current marketplace expectations. That was a key learning through this entire process, and engaging with customers to make sure that what we're creating is actually meeting their expectation. And then embracing that comprehensive assurance process, of which auditing is only one piece. And the Common Swine Industry Audit is available for anyone to use and is currently being used throughout the industry this year. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions. My contact information, Jamie Amundsen, who's our manager of animal welfare, she can help with questions. And if they're specific to PQA Plus, Dinah Peebles on our staff can help there as well. Yep.
So then today, PQA advisors cannot perform the audit unless they go through training. Would that be correct?
Simply answered, yes. In reality, your advisor won't be able to complete an audit simply because they are more of a second party rather than a third party. So they have a relationship with you as the producer. They're oftentimes it might be your veterinarian. So they work with you as a consultant. And so if the goal is to have a third-party audit, they're really not able to fill that role in an appropriate manner to provide that external credibility.
So then if my packer required that for this year, it's basically at their expense to find an auditor to perform it, right?
It may be, depending on the marketplace where you sell.
What's the chances of the Common Swine Industry Audit and the PQA site assessment at some point in time being rolled together so there's one audit or assessment?
So with the PQA Plus Revision, the assessment will look more like the audit the next go-round. They will never be one and the same, because they have two different purposes, but they will model each other.
Is there a website or template you go to get some of these, like the SOPs and that kind of stuff, so you're not trying to come up from scratch?
Absolutely. So on pork.org/common audit, there is a resource link there, and there will be templates for every single piece of the audit. So if the audit says you have to have this record, there will be a template there for you to use. Other questions? Yep.
How long do you think that audit would last? How long would it take in order to perform that audit?
So based on our beta testing, and that's a little bit of a tricky question depending on the factors, but for a typical sow farm, usually takes 4 to 5 hours. On a wean to finish, it's usually around the 2-hour window.
The reason I asked is we went through one and it took 8.5 hours to get to the sow farm.
Oh.
finish up. And we weren't prepared for that, I guess, maybe a half-hour day.
Okay.
Where we were told 4 to 5. But you were right on the wean and finish nursery. Finisher is about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
We were just.
Okay. But that's good feedback. Like I said, our beta tests, that's kind of what we found, but that's good to know. Thank you.